Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Kay Cote. I'm your podcast host here at Action Coast in Central Texas. And today on the show, we have Alex Fink, founder of Otherweb. And today we're going to be talking with Alex about his journey into business ownership, challenges, best practices, and share a peek to what it's really like to own and operate a business. If this is your first time on our channel, be sure to like and subscribe to get notifications when we drop new conversations just like this one. Alex, welcome and thank you to this show. And thank you for being here. I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself and your business.
Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Alex Fink. I'm the founder of Otherweb. We are an AI company that is trying to clean up the news and remove all the junk so that people can consume higher quality information. So this started off as just a project between me and a friend, trying to learn how to measure content quality. And pretty quickly, it evolved into a platform with more than 8 million users right now, with a large engineering team in Eastern Europe, marketing in the US. We have Android and iOS apps. We have a web app. We have widgets that are running on other people's websites. And things are kind of progressing from there.
That is incredible. I know I took a little look at your website and I saw that and I was like, this is what we need because it's like we're so bombarded these days with so much information and a lot of that information isn't serving us. And so this is like a really great resource for people to like get clued in on the real stuff and like the news that is out there that's going to be beneficial to know. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about like your ownership structure. You said it was you and a friend. Are you the founder? Are you guys co-founders? Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'm the only founder. That friend couldn't leave his job because he's making too much money where he's working right now. So he became an advisor to the company officially. The company is structured as a public benefit corporation, which is kind of like a C Corp, but with the mission being binding, right? And we wanted our mission of improving the quality of information that people consume to be at least as important as making money, so that if the two ever come in conflict, making money doesn't just outright win as it does in all other C Corps, right? So that is the structure. I'm the sole founder. We had a few angel investors early on. I was the first one, but then a few others joined. And after that, we made the decision not to approach institutional capital, VCs, etc., but rather to open up funding to the public via Reg CF, which is basically a regulation from 2017 onwards that allows regular unaccredited investors to invest in startups. So we currently have about 2,100 individual investors, each investing somewhere between $900 and $1,000 on average, right? It varies. The biggest one is 300K and the smallest one is $250, right? So there's a lot of variance there. But what that gives us beyond just money is a built-in community of super users who like the product so much they invested in it. And therefore, we can always come to them with questions about what to build next. What do you think about this direction? What do you think about this feature? How should we call this thing to make normal people who aren't engineers understand what it is, etc.
Mhm. Oh, that's really cool. That's a new structure to me. So it's really nice to learn about that, the existence of that. How did you come upon utilizing that structure as opposed to more of a traditional structure?
You're talking about the funding structure, right?
The funding structure, yeah.
So I was just spending a lot of time online, as founders typically do, talking to a lot of people. I think I talked to 300 people before even incorporating the company, just trying to get feedback on the idea from people who are in the industry or in academia or other founders who are working on something adjacent, etc. And then I also spent some time in the startups.com community, and I became friends with one of the lead advisors there at Kang. And so I think that idea initially may have come from him.
Okay.
And that now he's telling our methods and our story to all of his other startups that he's mentoring, and sometimes sending some of them to me for advice on how to do a Reg CF.
Oh, that's very, very cool. Like I was immediately intrigued too. I was like, this is a really awesome structure. It's so different and unique, and it seems like it works in a really cool way. So very awesome. So I'd love to kind of dive into what your role looks like today, as the founder. Talk about what do you spend for hours working in the business, like the job of what you do, and how many hours would you say you work on the business, like strategy, planning, and things like that?
Well, I think the correct answer for any founder is 24/7, right? It's almost like if you remember the movie Fight Club, with insomnia, you're never really asleep and never really awake.
Hmm.
So as a founder, you're never really fully at work and never really fully out of work, right? You don't have this clear separation. If something happens while I'm sitting at home with the kids, I still have to tend to it while the kids are climbing on top of me. And then if I'm at work, but I'm still working 10 minutes away from home, sometimes I have to drive and fix a burst pipe or something, right? So it's kind of a mix of everything. Um, I would say that because I come from both an engineering and an operations background, I tend to do a little bit of everything. So on the engineering side, I know just enough to understand what the developers are about to do and to catch them if they're about to do something wrong. I couldn't do what they do. I couldn't write code, right? But I can read their code and verify if it matches what we were actually planning.
Hmm.
So I'm almost like the bachelor level student that they have to explain stuff to in order to get permission to do what they are about to do. On the operations side, obviously, that is my background. I ran a consulting company before this. So I tend to be pretty involved in everything from doing the legal work. Some of it I just do myself because an attorney isn't necessary. Some of it is just working with the attorney to set things up. The accounting, obviously, we have a interim CFO that does most of that. But then when it's time to categorize all the expenses, then I'm the one who spends time on the phone with her going one by one over all the line items. So it's pretty varied. I think as a founder, especially if you're a sole founder, you kind of have to be a generalist. You can't just focus on one thing. You might be able to focus if there's several of you and you just divide the responsibilities between you. But if you're by yourself, you have to understand everything, at least to the degree that you'll be able to supervise people. Because
Hmm.
just outsourcing things to somebody, if you don't understand what they're doing, is a recipe for disaster. You have to understand it enough to take delivery of their output.
Mm, yeah, that is very true. It's like you have to wear or at least understand all the hats of the business to run smoothly. I definitely I resonate with that, and it kind of want to leads me into my next question. Regarding your business and why it is so special. Like who primarily does your business serve? Like who are you outreaching? Who's your audience? Like how would I know I'd be a good fit for your service?
Well, we are trying to make it so that everybody is a good fit. If you read the news or if you consume information anyway, then we might be a fit for you. Now, because of how it started and who it essentially catered to early on, who the early adopters were, our crowd tends to be much more educated than average. It tends to be almost bifurcated into two groups. One is the information junkie that is just used to consuming very large amounts of information, and we allow them to do it more efficiently. So we have summaries of every article. You can just skim through hundreds of them in a row. That's what I do every day, right? But then there's another group of people who were so annoyed with the news and so annoyed with what the internet has become that they've decided to just completely check out and never check the news again. And
Hmm.
we are reintroducing them to news that informs instead of just bombarding you with outrage and other emotions, right? So one of our first advisors is in that group. He's a retired guy who was twice CTO of two companies that made large exits, right? He's very successful, and he just thinks the news is terrible. There's no benefit to consuming it. But I slowly convinced him that the right kind of news is still useful. The news that is terrible is news that just gives you something to be outraged about that you can do nothing about. And that is obviously not useful, but to the extent that we can give people information that will actually inform their decisions, we've done our job.
I'm in that category number two. I can see it right away because like right when I read about it, I was like, oh, this is news I'm actually gonna listen to and like take in because it is so like filtered and sourced like to the truth. So I'm curious to know like who are your competitors right now and how do they compare with what you're doing?
Well, there's a lot of different companies with partial overlap with what we do. So first of all, there's all of traditional media, right? So to an extent, you could say a person can go to an aggregator like us, or they can just select one good source and stick with that source.
Mhm.
So that is one type of competitor. The other one is social media, who obviously don't provide that kind of quality control. Anybody can go in and post something stupid on social media, but a lot of people do get their news from that and cite that as a source. Typically, I would say those are the people that are most siloed and least informed, at least in the surveys that we've done. But still, it is a fairly large proportion of people doing that. And so you could say that is competition for us. And then
Mhm.
you have some companies that are trying to innovate in the space. Generally speaking, I would even say some of them had a similar approach to us. Artifact, which was launched by the founders of Instagram, it closed 2 months ago because I guess their approach didn't work that well.
Mhm.
But I considered them to be the closest competitor to us for a while. And I almost took it as a point of pride that we are competing with the founders of Instagram, and it looks like we won. So
That says something. That is cool. What is one thing that you wish people kind of like knew more about your business?
well, I wish people realize to what extent the ecosystem is becoming worse, to what extent they are getting less information density when they consume anything online right now. We've done this repeatedly, and in every survey, we just ran one with Harris, the big polling company, a couple of weeks ago.
Mhm.
And the vast majority of people say they spend more time consuming political news than they did 5 years ago,
Mhm.
but they know less.
Mm.
They spend more time trying to figure out what is true and not true, and they still don't know. They're completely confused by what is going on, etc. It's not that the people have changed. It's that you actually get less information
Mm.
in the content that you're consuming. The density has gone down. And so the problem exists. It's getting worse and worse. It will become even worse as generative AI becomes widely adopted in the news industry, because now creating bad content will become essentially zero cost, right?
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
until now somebody working for BuzzFeed, I'm going to pick on them because they're out of business now, right? If a person working for them used to create 10, 15 articles per day that were pure clickbait and had no informational value, right? That is the maximum that they could produce. With the help of generative AI, they can produce 500, they can produce
Mm.
1500, right? They will become better and better at this. But the investigative journalist spending 3 months trying to really dig into a story and get to the truth is still going to have to spend 3 months. They're
Mhm.
not going to speed up. And so the signal to noise ratio has been going down already, but now it's going to really plummet. And if we don't develop some sort of a tool to filter what we are consuming, it will basically be like reading your spam folder. You have to have
Yeah.
a filter of some sort, otherwise it's just a waste of time.
Yeah, I definitely can see that, just even like viewing stuff and seeing things that pop up in my randomly. Like, I'm like, what is that? I can't even fathom like what is actually being said. And I read it and I'm like, there's nothing here. It's a bunch of ads, it's a bunch of junk. But yeah, I digress. But yes, talking about this is, it sounds like, it's a much needed service. It's a much needed source for us to get the better information. So I'd love to talk about kind of getting into the marketing. How do you share about your company with people? What are you doing for marketing to get people to know about what you offer?
I would say the best thing that has worked for us better than anything else almost put together is just making sure the product is good, and there's a big share button under every article. That share button has accounted for more than 50% of our signups in every single month since we started this. So that's the biggest thing. Product-led growth. If your product is good, if it's easy to share, then that can outdo all the other methods. Now, besides this, I would say PR has been helpful.
Mhm.
So it's one thing to try to advertise on some niche site somewhere and reach a small number of people. It's quite another to go on a large television network and explain what you do. And then suddenly I see dozens of signups the same day telling me that they come from that source. And if dozens of people tell me that that's where they found me, there's probably a couple of thousand of people that didn't tell me that's where they found me, right? Because very small
Mhm.
percentage of people respond to our welcome email. So PR has been good. Advertising has been good to the extent that it was an after effect of the RegCF campaign. So advertising to get users is probably not a good idea if you have a free product, because you're not monetizing those users, means you're just spending money. But if we advertise to get investments,
Mm.
and for every person that invests, 100 people sign up to test out the product, then those people signing up are essentially free. They're a bonus. So we've gotten quite a few users that way as well.
Those are some unique approaches. I really like that too, because it's like you're utilizing the power of like that direct communication too with people
Mhm.
and like and tapping into their networks as well. So that helps you grow. Are you utilizing any social media or are you kind of staying away from that? How do you work with social media?
Well, it's something that we should definitely do more of, but I've never used it personally. I have a head of marketing who has never used it personally. And so I would say, as a company, we're just not good at it. It's a
Mm-hmm.
skill set we need to develop, but in general, there are things that are in the DNA of the company and things that we need to still develop. Social media is a weak spot for us.
Mm-hmm. Do you have approaches to like tracking leads and people you work with? Like, are you using a CRM to like track things or do you have a CRM that you prefer?
Yeah, I think that would be more applicable to a B2B or a SaaS company. In
Mm-hmm.
our case, we're talking about millions of users that we aren't monetizing. So tracking them in any sort of CRM doesn't quite make sense. So in the kind of business that we're in, it's more important to track users' interaction with the product in something like Amplitude, where you
Mm-hmm.
can just see exactly what they've done, how many times they came back, what is the typical flow of how they use the product while they're in it. That tends to be more important than the lead gen side of things.
Mm-hmm.
If we launch a few B2B products, and there are some things that we can do in that market, because essentially the toolkit of evaluating information quality is universal. You can apply it to the consumption side to help people filter what they consume. You can also apply it to the production side to give a journalist feedback on how they're writing. You can
Mm-hmm.
apply it to the advertising side to give ad buyers feedback on what they're about to publish their ad on,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they will revise how much they're willing to pay once they see it, right? So you can apply it at every single stage of this life cycle. And we're probably going to launch some B2B products when that happens. Once we get there, we'll probably use a CRM. I'm not an expert at this. When I was in semiconductors, we used Pipedrive or something super cheap like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I love that journey. And we've talked a lot about your marketing. I'd love to like share a little bit about you, why did you choose to go into business for yourself as opposed to choosing to work for somebody else? Like what was that transition like for you?
Well, it was complicated because I've essentially dreamt about being a founder and an entrepreneur since I was 12, but I also dreamt about being in the US since I was 12. And those two things came in conflict because what I needed to do to get to the US was work for a company that will relocate me. And that postponed the founder journey for a bit. Essentially, I quit my job and tried to found my first company the day I got my green card. I
Mm-hmm.
basically got my green card, came to work, announced that I quit. That quitting process took 6 months, but doesn't matter. Then I founded my first company, realized I basically know nothing about running a business. All I knew was how to code. And so as a company, it completely flopped, but the code was good. And I started getting offers to basically do some code for hire consulting with that thing that I already developed from a couple of large companies. So I did that for a couple of years, then figured, okay, if I want to be an entrepreneur, I need to learn these things that I don't know. So I went to work for my former boss, but this time in a marketing capacity. And I worked in marketing for a bit. I even did some sales. And then I tried to create my own company again. And it also turned into a consulting company. And I ended up building 35 products in 7 years for other companies again. Uh, After 7 years of doing that, and that was mostly cameras, computer vision, that sort of thing, I decided I think the world doesn't need more cameras. I think what I was doing to make money doesn't quite align with my values. And that's when I started looking around and the Otherweb idea was born. So this is, in some sense, the first real product company that is actually behaving as a product company that I run. The previous two attempt turned into consulting of some sort.
I've seen that happen. That's interesting story. I've had that happen myself actually too. So it's interesting you say that. And I love that you kind of have found that like niche where you really want to be. Um, I kind of want to fast forward to now and see what are you looking to do within the next 3 to 5 years with your business?
Well, when you're a startup, you tend to think almost in weeks and not in years, or at least you have to keep both thoughts in your head at the same time. But the primary goal right now is to grow as much as we can. And that's true for two reasons. The first one, that adds value to the company itself. And the second one is that it signals to the rest of the industry that people value this thing, right?
Mhm.
And if we can show that many people care about quality when they consume it, that will also allow us then to go to the producers of content or the distributors of content or to advertisers and tell them, look, people care about quality. They
Mhm.
signal that by using our product. Therefore, here's a product that you can use when you create it or distribute it or monetize it. So that is pretty important. I would say the focus for this year is still primarily to grow to 15 to 20, maybe to 25 million if we can get there by December. That will already be quite respectable. While we do that inside the product, it's pretty important to improve engagement as well. We're starting with a bit of a handicap compared to some of our competition, social media, especially, in that we're trying to get people to use this product every day without addicting them, right? While giving them healthy
Mhm.
things. We are competing with companies that are trying to get people to use their product every day by addicting them and giving them sugar and cocaine all day, right? And so it's a tough competition. We've gotten to the point where our engagement is well above average, but that's not good enough, right? We need to be top 100 apps in the App Store by engagement. And right now, I would say we are top 3,000, maybe.
Mhm.
So we still have a ways to go to get to that elite level. And that is important because acquiring users is great, but if a large percentage of them don't stick around by day 30, then you have to acquire users over and over and over again, right?
Mhm.
So engagement is itself a good way to build the user base, maybe even more important than figuring out how you bring in new users.
That's very true. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned goals, like this is your goal. Like, what is your approach to goal setting, and like how many goals do you have at once? And like, what's the time frame for your goals?
This has changed quite a bit as I got older. When I was younger, then everything was about goals and milestones, and the process almost didn't matter. It was like if I have to shovel shit to get to where I need to go, then I will just do that, right? As long as I reach that goal, I enjoy the process just because it's tied to that goal that I like. As I get older, I understand that the process itself is important, at least in the sense that I can learn from it. And that sometimes the quantifiable goal isn't that important. What's important is making progress every day
Mhm.
towards that correct direction. So it's almost hard for me to define at this point. I would say the company has a clear mission, a guiding North Star,
Mhm.
but it can pivot pretty freely on the way there. As long
Mhm.
as it's in the right direction and it's making progress, then we're doing well. So I set goals for others more than I do for myself these days. I know
Mhm.
that others who are younger are still motivated by goals the way I was 20 years ago. And so I have to tell them we need this many signups by end of the month, or we need to get retention from 20% to 25% D30 by end of this month, right? But for myself, I'm just thinking, what is the right thing to do? What is the best move? And that's my focus every single day. It's almost as if I'm playing chess, right? I don't want to do what my emotions are urging me to do. I don't
Mhm.
want to do what others expect of me. I just want to look at the position and make the best move every time.
Oh, I really like that approach, the chess approach. Yes, definitely. I resonate with that. We've covered some amazing ground in this conversation. And for those of you watching, I highly encourage you, like, watch this a few times. It has so many great nuggets in it. So as we're beginning to wrap up, I have a few rapid fire questions for you, these quick top of mind answers. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Sure.
Awesome. But first question is, what is the key to success for you?
Action.
Great answer. What is the one piece of advice you have for other business owners?
Try to figure out what you're really good at and follow that. Like it, you can spend a lot of time trying to shore up all your weaknesses, and then you'll realize you're mediocre at everything. So trying to figure out what you're really good at and trying to put at least most of your resources into that is probably going to result in a larger output.
Yes. Okay. What is one book, piece of content, podcast, anything that you're reading currently or have read most recently?
I'm reading stuff all the time, so I guess it's hard to pick one. I would say one that tends to come up over and over when I talk to people and try to explain what we're doing, at least recently, is Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Ramelt,
Mm,
because it takes apart a lot of things that aren't really strategy, but people call it that. including goal setting, right? And it actually defines what strategy is and how it differs from all of these things and how it helps you act better.
I'm putting that one on my list for sure. If you had to choose only one area of your business you could immediately improve on tomorrow, what would it be?
Ooh, that's hard. I would say community building. And I mean that to include social media, which I mentioned is one of our weaknesses, to include following up with users, with super users, with investors, and basically making sure that everybody is communicating with us and with each other without us being in the room. We
Mhm.
could definitely use some help there.
Awesome. Well, those are really awesome rapid fire questions and answers. And before we get to the final question of the day, how can people find you? This is a great way we can kind of start that process of, building that community. Share about your company. How can they get in contact with you?
Sure. Well, otherweb.com is the website. Or if you prefer to just download the apps directly, then on either Google Play or App Store, it's called Otherweb. And download it, try it out, send us some feedback if you like it or if you don't like it. I'm alex@otherweb.com, so you can just email me directly and tell me what you think of it. Hopefully without too many curse words, but I can handle myself. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We have one final question we love to ask is what is most inspiring to you today?
I think trying to actually change the world in some meaningful way. Right? I tend to imagine a world where I'm doing what I'm doing and the world where I'm just on a beach somewhere drinking mojito, right? And if there's no difference between these two outside of my experience, then I'm doing something wrong, right? My actions need to somehow change the world in a meaningful way, maybe locally, maybe globally. I don't know. That depends on the magnitude of what I'm doing, but it has to result in something. Otherwise, the mojito approach is going to win.
That's a great analogy. I really like that. Well, Alex, this has been such a joy to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me.